Hello and good day, pre-algebra. We are moving on to CO2, writing rational numbers as both fractions and decimals. So we defined a rational number in CO1. It's basically most anything. It can be a fraction, it can be a decimal, it can be an integer, it can be a whole. But today we're going to focus on that conversion between fractions and decimals. And the value for that, when you write, well, first of all, what does it mean to convert? Let's start with the definition. What does it mean to convert something? If I convert all of you to be Packer fans, or you're converting a value, you're changing it, right? Okay, you are writing something a different way. So in mathematics, to convert means to write a value another way. Okay. And the key with conversion is when you convert something, the value itself doesn't change. You're just writing it differently. And fractions and decimals are one of those things that sometimes fractions get used, sometimes decimals get used. When you go shopping, have you ever seen a price of $2.75 written as 11/4 dollars? No, right? Would this be right? Is 11/4 of a dollar the same thing as 2.75? Yes. But when we talk about money, we only use decimals. We don't really use fractions. Those that like to bake, when you're reading a recipe and you need 3/8 cup of sugar, it doesn't say 0.375 cup. It says 3/8. Baking is one of those things where fractions are used rather than decimals, even though this would be the same value. It's just as correct. I always said I'm going to open up a math-only store. I'll sell things like root beer, but it's going to be square root beer. It's going to come in a square thing. It's going to be 4 ounces or 9 ounces or 16 ounces square root beer. And my prices are going to be in fractions just to mess with people. But anyway, okay, so we're going to focus today on conversion, writing forms a different way, but maintaining that original value. And starting with integers, we talked about this when we introduced integers yesterday. If I've got the integer 9, how do I write 9 as a decimal? How do I write 9 as a decimal? Yeah, Zoe. That'd be a fraction, right? So if I wanted to write it as a fraction, just take that 9, put it over 1. Okay, so that's how you convert an integer to a fraction. But what about a decimal? 9.0. So it's pretty easy to turn an integer into a fraction or a decimal. You're saying that you have 9 wholes with that fraction, 9 over 1, 9 wholes. And then with a decimal, remember that number before the decimal tells you how many wholes you have. And then the number after the decimal is how many parts you have. 9 wholes, 0 parts. Same as 9 wholes. If our integer is -12 as a fraction and a decimal, who'd like to give me one of them? Your choice. Anybody? Everyone in YouTube land is going to think I teach you an empty classroom. You can do this. What's -12 as a fraction? I'll give you a hint. It's just like 9 as a fraction, except -12. Yeah. -12 over 1, exactly, okay? Anytime you are converting an integer to a fraction, it goes over 1, because that's how many wholes you have, okay? And with a denominator of 1, I think we mentioned this, the fraction bar is really just a division symbol, right? It's a way to write division vertically. Okay, in fact, that's where our actual division sign comes from, right? It's like you've got a number over something else. That's where that division is kind of derived from. So this really says -12 divided by 1, which is -12. How about as a decimal? Yes. -12.0, exactly. Okay, so integers to fractions, just put over 1. Integers to decimals, 0.0. Things get fun, though, when we convert from fractions to decimals and decimals to fractions. Now, these being key points, they can go on a help sheet, okay? You can write in words how to convert a fraction to a decimal. So let's start with, let's go 4/5. Someone remind me, think back to last year. How would you convert this to a decimal? Anthony?
You make the 5 into 100.
Yes, right? Because decimals are they're written out of 100, okay? And how do we get there? What's our scale factor to get from 5 to 100? Yeah.
Times 20.
Multiply by 20. And since that's what we did to the denominator, that's what we have to do to the numerator, right? And 4 times 20 is 80. Well, that's still a fraction, isn't it? But now that our denominator is 100, how do we write that in decimal form? Why was that so key that we got that 100 there? 80 hundredths? How do you write 80 hundredths as a decimal? Well, remember the hundredths place is two numbers after the decimal point, right? So 0.80 or just 0.8. That'd be fine also, okay? But 80 hundredths. Let's go something like 14 25ths. Same process here, right? We want to get that denominator of 100. The question is, how do we get there? What's our scale factor? What do we have to multiply by? Aiden, 4. And what we do to the denominator, we have to do the numerator. So 14 times 4 gives us 56. And just like before, well, that's still a fraction, but if you read it as 56 hundredths, we know that it's going to be 0.56 because you'd read that decimal 56 hundredths as well. Okay? Are the light bulbs flickering back to last year? Kind of remembering this? Yeah? Okay, good. From decimals to fractions, let's go with something like 0.37. How do we get that to a fraction? It's kind of the opposite of what we did up above, right? Because it's going the other direction. Nolan?
I don't know how to, but I know I know the answer.
What is the answer?
37 over 100.
37 over 100. Now, why does that work? Why is that correct? Right, because one way to read this is 0.37 or 37 hundredths, right? 37 hundredths. And if you think about that phrase 37 hundredths, that means 37 out of 100, 37 hundredths. Fraction, just like that, right? If we could simplify it, then we would. In this case, we can't, so we would leave it as 37 hundredths, okay? How about something like 0.45? 0.45. How can you read that decimal? Mia? 45 hundredths, right? 45 over 100. In this case, we can simplify. What can we divide both 45 and 100 by?
5.
Divide by 5. Okay. And that gives us 9/20ths, which would be our final answer. Right? So this objective is a lot to do with 100. Okay, that denominator of 100 is key in both versions here. Right? You want that denominator of 100 when you write it as a fraction. How do you get there? In this case, you write it as something over 100. What if you have a larger decimal, such as 3.71? Ooh. How would you write that in fraction form? You have some holes there now. What do you think? Yeah? Okay, anybody?
Is it like just like 371 hundredths?
Yeah, same thing. You take that number that you have, 371, and put it over 100. Okay, and why this works is because this being an improper fraction, right? 371 over 100, you know it's greater than 1 anyway. You know it's greater than 3 because 100 can go into 371 3 times with a little bit more. As that this says the same thing here. Okay, we have 3 wholes and then 71 hundredths, right? So, cool. Questions? Okay. The checkpoint below says you will not be able to use a calculator on this section of the test, but you can check your answer by calculating the fraction, 3/5, again, that correlation with division there, and making sure the resulting decimal matches your decimal answer. What I mean by that, again, not on the test, you don't have a calculator for this, but as you're doing your homework, if you take 14 divided by 25 in your calculator, you will get 0.56. All right, that's how you can check, that's how you can verify that the work that you did here is correct. So on the homework, the calculator can be used to check your answer. However, on the test, you'll just have to require the use of your brain. Okay? All right. I think that's the gist of the lesson here. Yeah, there we go. Mr. Happy Pencil on page 2 says, convert integers to both a fraction and a decimal, convert decimals to a fraction, fractions to a decimal, and then show your work. Okay, since I'm not testing whether or not you can just push buttons in a calculator in the correct order, I need to see how you get from one to the next. So you've got 15 of them here to do. And then the second section says match each fraction to its decimal value. You have 2 sets. So which decimal over here is the same thing as 3/10? Which, yeah, 0.3. So you would draw a line from 3/10 down to 0.3. Okay, and then do the same thing with all the rest of them. Okay. We have about 18 minutes left together. Any of these that you want to talk about? Any of these that look particularly intriguing that you want to do together as a class? That's teacher speak for I'm going to reduce your homework load by doing some together with you, but I need you to tell me which ones you want to do together. Zoe. Sure. So 18, starting out as an integer, the directions say write that as both a fraction and a decimal. So 18 as a fraction, 18 as a decimal, what will it be? Adrian.
As a fraction, it would be.
Brilliant.
As a decimal, it would be.
Brilliant. Yes. For those integers, okay, that aren't written as a fraction or a decimal to start with, you can make them one by putting it either over 1 for a fraction or 0.0 for the decimal. Another one. This is fun. Nolan. 19 20ths. So here's a fraction, and your task is to rewrite this as a decimal. So you look back at the front page and say, okay, what's my key here? I've got to get that denominator of 100. That's what I want. Okay? That's what I need. How do you get from 20 to 100? What's the scale factor? What multiplied, or 20 times what brings you 100? Yeah, by 5. So you're going to multiply 20 by 5. You're going to multiply 19 by 5. And think about this mentally now, okay? If 25s give us to 100, what would 19 5s get us to? Right? 20 nickels, because they're 5 cents, right? 20 nickels is $1. You take a nickel away, you have 19 of them. Now, how much money do you have? You have 20 nickels, which is $1. You take one away, how much do you have? 95 cents, right? So 19 times 5, 95 over 100, We're not done yet, though, because that's still a fraction. But now that it's written with a denominator of 100, 95 hundredths, what's that going to be in decimal form? 0.95, which would be your final answer. Okay? That's the work that I need to see there, right? Show me what you're multiplying by to get there. Zoe. Negative 10, another integer. The fact that it's negative doesn't really change anything. To convert it to fraction form, you're still going to put it over 1. So negative 10 over 1. To convert to a decimal, you're still going to put 0.0. Negative 10.0. Negative 10 wholes, either way you look at it. Okay. Negative signs for this objective really don't affect your process at all. You see some negative fractions, negative decimals. Ooh, a negative mixed number. That's fun. Okay. But like this, for this negative 41/50ths, you still want to get a denominator of 100. Your negative sign doesn't affect the process. Just your answer is going to be negative when you're all done. Okay. Another to do. Yeah, Tristan. Sure. Negative 1.45. So this is a decimal, meaning we're going to convert it to a fraction. This number is more than a whole. It's more than negative 1 whole, but still it's more than a whole. So what do we talk about doing on the front side? We had that 3.71. This is a similar thing here. We still want to put something over 100, right? Because we're going from decimal to fraction. So you got to get that over 100 piece. What's our numerator going to be here? Yeah. Negative 145 over 100. Okay. Negative 145 over 100. Of course, we're not done because we do have to simplify. Anthony? Yes. It counts as 1 of your 7? Okay. So what can we divide 145 and 100 by? What goes into both of them? 5. Okay. So to simplify, divide by 5. And we get negative 29 over 20. And that would be our final answer. Negative 29/20. So again, that negative sign doesn't really change the process. We did the same thing we did if it had been positive 1.45. Just our answer at the end is going to be negative. Okay. So I think I'm going to let you do the rest. You've got 12 quality minutes to work on this, Khan Academy, the Pick'em, Math Masters, lots of stuff on your plate. It's like you're at a buffet. You have so many things you could pick from to work on, right? Options are plentiful. Okay. Remember the outro? With gusto. That's how you math. Thanks for remembering. Let's try everybody. Okay? With gusto. That's how you math.